everybody, welcome to another Webinar Wednesday. Thank you very much for joining us. I'm Kat, I'm the Marketing Manager here at Virtue. Unlike most Webinar Wednesdays, you can't actually see my face today, which is quite exciting for me, I'm not going to lie. I prefer to be a little bit more hidden, but you do get to see the lovely Ian, who's joining us, part of our Solutions Engineering team. Hi Ian.
Hi there.
And today we're going to be discussing our Cloud Connect solution, or our air gap solution. And basically we're going to be taking you through how it helps to keep your data secure and more protected from ransomware. And that pretty much sums up everything that I personally know about our Cloud Connect solution and air gapping.
You and me both.
So without further ado, I'm going to pass you over to Ian.
Hi guys, thanks for joining. I really appreciate it. My name's Ian. I've been with Virtue for going up to 2 years now, I believe. And as Kat said, I'm in the senior engineering team. And one of my many tasks has been to come up with a air-gapped backup solution. It's of I think some DFE guidance went out to some schools that asked, or kind of posed some questions around schools backups, and kind of set this process off on is there an air-gap solution that you're using, and as a result of that, I think a couple of our account managers became not maybe inundated is a strong word, but the queries were being asked, and so we came up with a potential solution within one of our knowledge and innovation groups. So without further ado, hopefully you can all see my screen. Do we get feedback?
Anybody at any time can send in a message into the chat window. So I should say that as well, actually. There will be Q&A at the end of this webinar, so anything that kind of is more in a Q&A format we'll address at the end of the webinar. But aside from that, you can pop anything you like into the chat box at any time, and I will interrupt Ian to ask on your behalf. Or as I say, if it's part of the Q&A, I'll leave it till the end, but we'll make sure we get to all your questions.
Okay, thank you. So this is something I threw together very late last night, back in the sick packet type approach. This is a basic top-level overview of what we're looking at, what we've got. On the left-hand side is an example of a high school, but it would work for a primary school. Your typical ASXi hypervisor or even Hyper-V. You've got your Veeam management server, which in most high schools is a virtual machine, and then you've got the backup proxy, which is a physical machine, and those of you that are really lucky have got a WAN accelerator as well.
What's a WAN accelerator, Ian?
Oh wow, what a question. So so the WAN accelerator is basically, so when you set up your backup jobs, you can do compression, you can do deduplication, which is all great in reducing the amount of data being sent across the WAN. But WAN accelerators do this really clever trick where they'll find blocks of data that are the same or similar, and they'll tag them, so it doesn't need to send all the data. It knows that it can recreate the data on the other side based on data it's already received. So say, for example, you're sending over 20 terabytes of data after you've deduplicated and compressed. The WAN accelerator might get that down to 10, 5, less, depending on how similar some of that data is. And then on the other end of it, we've got a WAN accelerator that rebuilds it.
Okay.
So you're sending it almost like Lego, and then we rebuild it on the other side, and that reduces the amount of bandwidth needed and the amount of data being sent, which speeds things up massively, particularly if you've got a lot of machines or a lot of data. For example, a lot of customers send the file servers up to us. The file servers tend to be a number of terabytes, ranging from 1 terabyte to 3, 4, 5 terabytes. Sometimes there's multiple file servers. You can imagine how long that would take backing up every night if you were sending 5, 6, 7 terabytes across your WAN connection, which is typically what, 100 meg, 200 meg. It just wouldn't happen in a 24-hour period. So WAN acceleration allows us to get that data to us in nightly, within 24 hours, so your backups are current and relevant.
So what would happen if you didn't use it?
If you didn't use it, you'd use what was called direct mode, and it would just literally send the data. After it's compressed it, after it's deduplicated it, it'll just send it to us, and however long that takes is however long that takes, and it's just, that's it. So you may end up having to send a file server to us every 2 days, every 3 days, or maybe you're sending a number of SQL servers to us, a number of file servers, and a number of other things to us, and jobs just take a number of days to complete instead of, a lot of, I'm assuming that people that would want this solution are doing so because they want the data secure immediately. So that's within 20, you do your backup on the night, and we take that backup copy away that night as well. But if you've not got one acceleration, we just can't guarantee that we'll take that copy that night. It may take over a day to get to us. Depends totally on the size of the data you're sending. Primary schools probably don't need one acceleration because they're not likely to have the types of data that high schools have. But high schools do tend to have a lot of data and a lot of servers that they want to send over that. Servers that are critical to a high school that they want to send to us, and from that you would definitely, I've kind of made it one of the requirements of sale actually that they need one acceleration.
Okay.
So essentially, we have a Veeam instance in our cloud infrastructure, which is basically a VMware cluster in a data center in Manchester. I won't go into too much detail for security reasons. Got to keep this secure. You don't know who's going to watch this video in the years to come.
Well, who knows?
So basically, we've got a Veeam instance, a more advanced Veeam instance than we typically see in a high school. We've got the managed service provider edition. Schools generally have backup and replication. Very similar interface, very similar setup. And with that, we've got what are known as Veeam Cloud Gateways, which is what allows us to present storage safely to another customer who's got Veeam. And then from those gateways, behind them are then the accelerators, and behind them is then the backup server itself, and there's the storage. But if a slide across to the right, you'll see this in a bit more detail. Should we pause for questions now, do you think?
No, carry on. We've not had any come through live, so for anybody who's joined us a little bit late, you can pop a question into the Q&A at any point. And we'll probably get to them at the end unless it's really, really topical for what Ian's talking through right at the minute. But even if we don't get to it at the time, we will do Q&A at the end, so don't worry about that.
Sounds good. Okay, so you can imagine you've added a repository to our cloud repository to your Veeam instance. And for all intents and purposes, you just see a new backup location you can select in your backups. Drop it down, select the Cloud AG repository, and you just back up to it, and that's all you'll see. But from our perspective, we've got load balance gateways that securely present those repositories to the customers, and those are load balanced for resiliency reasons, but also for performance reasons as well, because they will, if one's under heavy load, new backup jobs or backup jobs that suddenly start running, will move to the next gateway, and the next gateway, and so on, to make sure that we can meet the demand of our customers. Those gateways then talk to our WAN accelerators, which rebuild your backup data. That's because your WAN accelerators pulled it apart, made it always as efficient as possible. We've got that data now, and now our WAN accelerators start putting it back together. And our Veeam proxies, our WAN accelerators are load balanced for resiliency and for performance. Then those WAN accelerators pass those to our Veeam proxies, which as customers, you have a Veeam proxy on site that processes data. We've got multiple in the data center that process your data, again, for resiliency and for performance, which then drops your data into our Veeam backup repository, or rather your Veeam backup repository, your unique Veeam backup repository, which is on our primary backup storage, which is then dropped into a secondary snapshot vault, which I'll now go into detail about.
I'm going to ask a question again. So what is a snapshot and how does it work?
Sure. So snapshot is a moment in time capture of data. Now in our particular instance, we do volume level snapshots, and so we will snapshot the entire backup storage volume in one go. What it essentially does is it tags all the data to say, this is what the data looked like at this time, this moment in time. It's not really a backup, because if you lose the original data, then the snapshot's no use, because the snapshot is basically logging the changes from the moment in time you take the snapshot to the time you come to use that snapshot. So log in the changes. That's why snapshots will grow. Now, some of our customers will have probably noticed that they took a snapshot of a virtual machine on their site, and it was 15 mega or whatever it was, and then 3 months later, it's terabytes in size. It sets up all this space because it's constantly reading the changes made to the data from when the original snapshot was. So the snapshot grows with those changes. So in itself, a snapshot isn't a way to secure your data. But what we're doing is we're snapshotting the primary backup storage, and then we transfer it to a vault, which is a full copy then of the data as it was snapshotted. So if we did lose the primary data, we can restore the snapshotted version of it.
Okay.
So we're using snapshots in a way where we just clone the entire snapshot across. So we're not reliant on the original data. So if the data were to be corrupted on our primary storage, we can just restore it back from what's effectively a copy,
right,
a secondary copy of the primary storage. So just moving on a little bit. So going into a bit more about the gateways, which we've already covered, the WAN accelerators we've already covered, and then the proxies we've already covered. What happens then is, so each customer, or each school would be a tenant. You get sent credentials, usernames, and passwords, and a URL from us to add to your instance as a repository. And these are all segmented as partitions on our primary storage. So you've got your own partition, and it's quoted to whatever was basically. So there's no bleed over, tenant X can't affect tenant Y, and tenant Z can't affect tenant Z, and so on and so forth. An issue with one tenant can't affect another tenant.
Okay.
Then what we've got this RAN network, which is a replication-only network. And that's where the two storage systems talk to each other, but they only talk to each other for within a particular window of time, which for security reasons I won't tell you what it is. It's a number. There's a window of time, and within that window of time, they will replicate 3 times.
Okay.
And outside of that replication, that network is down, completely down. It only activates to replicate and then downs itself again. So it's never permanently linked. They're only linked to do a one-way copy, and then it downs itself. And within the window, it will do that 3 times. And the reason you might ask, why 3 times? I'll just do it once a day. So, looking at how the CDR backups have worked historically, customers are sending data to us all day, every day. Some start sending it at 5 o'clock at night. Some are sending it at midnight. Some are sending it at 3 o'clock in the afternoon. And so if we were just to snapshot the data that we take from the customer, today, some customers send data to us, and we've only got half of it, and we've snapshotted it and moved it away.
Yeah.
We've moved a copy away, and that copy is secure, but we've only got half of what they've sent, or half of what they're currently sending. So we're taking multiple snapshots a day to try and
capture
that, based on our CPI usage, which is quite extensive. So we're confident we've covered it. And so that then means that these storage devices are permanently talking to each other. They're only as I say, I won't mention what time they become active and but it will only randomly become active and then randomly drop off within a period of time.
Okay.
So say, for example, we said, this isn't the time, but let's say, for example, we said between 3 in the afternoon and 5 o'clock at night, you've got 3 opportunities. It will randomly make three attempts at moving this data. That is in the window. It's a bigger, better window than that, but just to give you an idea. And then this RAN network drops.
But it does it randomly so that nobody could kind of watch and know when the next one's coming.
Well,
okay.
So nobody can watch anyway because the way this is, I can't go into too much detail. Well, I could, but I don't want to give too much away.
Yeah.
Basically, how it works. But there's nothing else. There's no way to get at this network at all. It's totally isolated, and there's only the 2 storage arrays on it. Now, I appreciate that the primary storage is manageable, and so you could argue that that's a way to it, but there's no interface between the primary and the secondary storage through the RAN. So it's not, so it's impossible basically. But just to really go the extra mile with it, we've made this RAN network to self-terminate when it's not being used. Just to really push this gap requirement, to really prove that we are air gapping, even down to the level where we're transferring the data. It's only available and active while the snapshots are being moved. And typically a snapshot will move within 7-8 minutes, 10-15 minutes the most, because we've got these tremendous speeds between our SANs. I've taken up to 20. We're running 2 10 terabyte links at the minute, which we're going to up again shortly. So we're moving this data really quickly. So the window of opportunity is small, and from what I've seen and from Seth building this up, there's no way into the RAN anyway. If you got into it, it's this random window of 7 minutes, 7-8 minutes, and it's only open 3 or 4 times in a day. 3 times in a day, sorry. And
so we're just trying to basically create as many layers of security and protection throughout. That's
exactly it, yeah. And so even if you were sat in the RAN, you couldn't sit in the RAN because the RAN doesn't exist until the snapshots start.
Okay.
Then the RAN exists. So you'd have to get into it while the snapshots are running, but there's no way into it, so it's just capital. Secondary to that, the second storage array here that we've got, which really makes it air-gapped. The management aspect of it it's basically patched direct to a firewall that is internal, so there's no external route to the firewall, and it's then on its own VLAN, which can't be accessed from anywhere other than an SSL VPN login, and it's basically a 2FA account within the firewall, a local firewall account. 2FA. So you've got to have got through the 2FA token. You've got to be within our network to actually get to the firewall to log into the SSL VPN in the first place to manage the storage. And even if you get into it, there's no interface between the storage where you can say, right, delete all the data on the storage over there. There's no way that you can manage one array from the other, so it is really secure. Something just came to me then as I was speaking, and I've lost it. Some extra security that I've got in there. What was I saying? So yeah, so the management of one of the queries will always be how do you manage this air-gapped storage? And as I say, we do it through having it behind a internal firewall that isn't public facing at all, and the only way to get at it is through an SSL VPN login. The storage arrays themselves, the management are both set up with 2FA, so you've got to have a 2FA token to get to it. Then you've got to know the credentials, which are randomized. You've then, on top of that, regardless of whether the login was successful or not, an alert gets sent out to notify us that a login has been attempted, and it tells us where it came from, what time, happens to the second of the login. So if there's an unscheduled login, because there's only going to be me really logging into this, let's be honest. If there's an unscheduled login, that goes out to a set number of people, and if I'm not scheduled to be on that system at that time, people are going to react to that.
So that's securing it even in terms of what customers will know, but what non-customers won't know is that we have a project manager, Yvonne, who schedules all of our projects. So basically, as another kind of layer of security, if you're not scheduled to work in that environment, then obviously other members of the team get notified that you're in there, so that if we all thought that you might be corrupt and be doing something dodgy, then equally it's not dependent on
money
that.
Talks, guys, money talks. So the way it works at the minute is I email the group that's in that distribution to say, I'm working on this between such a time, any alerts between then and now, don't respond. And if I forget to do that, people start responding. As I learned after I first set it up. First time I'm doing it, I forgot to mention it. People started responding.
That is good though,
because you
guys know it works.
It was a good test. It was definitely a good test. So that kind of summarises how it works, how the air-gap side works, how we move the data from the primary storage over to the gap storage and how we secure that with the with the replication-only network. A couple of points I do need to make is that we can only support from V10.
Okay.
Anything less than V10 just won't work with them, because we've upgraded to Beam 11 to be the most secure version of the level 2 Beam technologies. We only support customers of Beam 10 and above. Ideally, most of our customers will be on Beam 11 now anyway, and if not, we're probably on a list to be done to be moved up to Beam 11. Any new customers, we probably put prerequisites in where we upgrade them to 10 or 11.
But we can help with that if
we do it all the time. Yes, we help with that. As I said earlier, for those that may have joined later, one acceleration is a must in my view. I've stressed to sales, this is more or less a prerequisite for this, particularly for high schools, because high schools tend to want to copy a lot of data within a tight window. Because the backup copies to us only really take place after the local backups are finished. And so if you imagine you've got your local backups only start at 5, or whatever time you start, they may only get 8, 9, 10 o'clock at night, and then that's our window to get it
before school opens again,
and there's impact on your broadband connection, etc. And so we definitely encourage, and I say probably push as a prerequisite that there's one acceleration. Just touching on that, actually, I was setting up a customer recently, 75 VMs, if I recall, and one of the issues we found was that we were seeing all this data and it was saturating the WAN mix and it impacted across the entire trust. And so what you can do, all we can do is we can set up, we can put throttles in place where between certain windows, so say for example, if your backups do run beyond the opening hours of the school, so say it's come 8 o'clock and 9 o'clock in the morning, and your backups are still running and copying to us, you can set up a throttle that kicks in at that time to drop the bandwidth down. It's not as a backup job now, yes, but it makes sure that you're not impacting the school operationally for that day, or just for that day. In terms of setting things up, we create, I think I touched on it before, we create a tenant, which is basically username and password and a quota, which we issue to the customer. Tenant quotas are hard enforced, so if you do hit, if you bought 14 terabytes or 10 terabytes and you hit 10 terabytes, your backups will stop. Your backups will stop locally. You'll be alerted to the fact that they've stopped. We at the moment we are alerted to them as well. I don't know whether there's a process in place for that. We would contact the customer from a sales point of view to say, you've run out of storage, you want to buy some more, or do you want to optimize things? But in terms of increasing the quota, it's not a big deal. No, we can just increase the quota. It's not.
It would probably come through via our support team first, our support desk team, but they would definitely reach out to our account managers. So the person that you're used to dealing with for everything will let you know the situation, or Roger on our support desk, and we'd be able to fix that for you.
Great. Just to reiterate, both the storage systems, as isolated as they are, they still have 2FA set up. As I said, there's an email notification that goes out at any attempt to log in, whether it's successful or not. So there's a key group of people, myself included, that are alerted to that and react in such cases. As I said, the management of the air-gapped secondary storage is isolated behind a local firewall, and that is also secured with 2FA. And the only way to get at it is through an SSL VPN. So again, on its own unique VLAN as well. So if you were to break into our system today and start scanning for things, if you were an opportunist and you got in and you started scanning, you would never find this solution on our system. You'd have to be SSL VPN'd in to this particular network to find it. So you'd have to have inside knowledge basically. So I'm doing it, yes. The RAM network, let me tell you, because that could be a security issue, because there is as those snapshots are moving, there is that link between the two storage arrays. But as I've said, you can't manage one storage array from the other. You can't manage one storage array from the other. But also on top of that, while this is active and while this automatically activates and deactivates as the data is being moved, it also randomizes the ports that it's on. So every time it reconnects, it's on a random port. That's negotiated between the two systems. So there's no scan, there's no attack vector to be scanning ports to find these networks as they come up, because the ports is always randomized and way outside any known range or any typical range, that's for sure.
Okay, so the question is, does this rely on a virtual internet connection?
No, it doesn't. It doesn't. I think typically the CDR version of this, the cloud disaster recovery solution that this kind of grew out of, but not this. We can provide it to customers that are on our circuit and customers that are off circuit. There's probably an advantage to being on circuit because you'll get better connectivity because you're technically on our network. Off our network is just with whatever speed your broadband will give you really, which is, as with any backup provider, you're not going to be on their network, are you? We're in a unique position where we have got customers who are on our network, so we can give better speeds to them as part of this, but it still works for customers that are off our network.
I mean, I have a question. So you've mentioned tenants quite a lot. So in terms of a multi-academy trust, does each school have a tenant, or how does that work?
Yeah. So what happens is a multi-academy. Well, it can be done multiple ways. A multi-academy trust could come to us and say, we want one big tenant with an allotted amount of space, and then we want all of our schools to connect to that one tenant, and we can just fight for the space. Just fight for it, and whoever needs it gets it. Or we can set up one big tenant with the allotted amount of space, and then we can add subtenants to that tenant and quota those subtenants as well. So say you had 70 terabytes and you had 7 schools, we could quota each school within that subtenancy with a 10 terabyte quota, or you may juggle them around. So
give more to a bigger secondary school, less to a smaller primary.
That's exactly
really clever.
And it offers you a bit of segregation within the way the data is stored in our system as well.
The other thing I'd say is, I'm finding out about this kind of with the people who are listening. So the only other thing that I thought was, you've talked about how secure it is and all the way through how difficult it is to get to that data. So what does that mean if a customer's hit with ransomware? How easy is it for us to get that data back to them?
So for us to get it back to the customer, it's really straightforward. Our primary storage is so the primary storage is snapshots. It's got 21 days of snapshots, and then the air gap storage has also got copies of those 21-day snapshots. So you would just restore from our primary repository as it's presented to you as a customer. You just do a normal restore job as you would with any other kit, but you choose the cloud storage over your local storage and recover from that way. If our primary storage was somehow hit and corrupted as well, that's when we would restore from our air-gapped storage to the primary storage, which you then run your restore job from again.
Okay, so our air gap is actually like a secondary air gap for the customer.
Yeah, that's right. Yeah, that's right. So we've got, it's basically an immutable copy of the customer's data elsewhere. Just to give you an idea of something that's coming as well, we're currently setting up a second data center. We're going to kind of stretch our services between these data centers to give us more resiliency. So we've got clusters and things in there. That's great, but if that data center, even though we've got all the resiliency within the data center, the data center went, all our resiliency means nothing because that's gone. So we're going to stretch our kit between our clusters between these two data centers, and that's coming in the coming months. We will actually move a lot of our cloud, split it in half basically, half in one data center, half in the other. And so the air gap storage will end up in another data center completely as well, which gives us another level of security. Because then you've got another level of firewalling. Just to get into that data center, you've got to get a particular layer of firewalling, etc. So it's just improving our cloud offering and the air gap solution more, as we go forward.
So is that it for plans to expand this in the future, or have you got other things in the pipeline?
No, yeah. So I was recently on site with a customer who wanted to test cloud disaster recovery solution. They've had it for a number of years. They've never called upon it, but they just wanted to know, you know, how does it work? How does it look? How does it look to us? Like, no, if a meteorite hits us tomorrow, or hits us today, what have we got? What have we got? What does it look like? How do we get at it? And so part of that was obviously I went to site and I showed them, and they were really happy with it. They were over the moon. They were really impressed with it. I think our response time is like, I don't know, 12 hours or something maybe. I got it within minutes. Really quick. And off the back of that, I came back and I went back to the knowledge and innovation team and said, why don't we look to bolt CDR onto this, because we're using the same VM infrastructure to deliver it. It's the same VM infrastructure that is used for the CDR system. Using exactly everything. Everything's the same. The only difference is different storage setup, different storage repository, different storage. So why don't we use the same solution to basically whatever bolts on for the ERGAP solution? That's basically cloud disaster recovery, where we can spin up customers' VMs in our cluster, present them back to the customer in the event of a, you know, God forbid, you know, a disaster scenario.
Our disaster recovery traditionally has just been kind of your bread and butter, your basic stuff, whereas this gives us the opportunity to do everything.
That's right. Yeah. So that's exactly right. So typically, CDR would be your SIM server, a domain controller, and some synchronized user data, which is the bare minimum, you know, gets us skills to be able to function in a bare minimum capacity. Whereas, if a customer's sending all their VMs to us, or the bulk of their VMs to us within this ERGAP solution, we can spin them all. Well, not yet, but we will very soon be able to spin them all up and present them back to the customer.
So I think you actually might have answered one of our pre-event questions. So for those of you who haven't joined us for Webinar Wednesdays before, or just haven't been able to join live, what you can do is once you know what webinars are coming up, or even after this webinar, if you think of any questions and you just didn't have any at the time, what you can do is you can send in pre or post event questions and even suggested ideas for our webinar Wednesdays. A lot of topics come direct from our customers, so don't be afraid to do that. And you can just email marketing@virtuetechnologies.co.uk, and that's how they come through. So I know that you are waiting for questions from our millions of viewers who are on right now, but we've actually had some pre-event ones just to scare you. Okay. So one of the pre-event ones was, we already have your disaster recovery backup. Thanks very much.
And it works.
Yeah. And how is this solution different? So you've kind of already touched on that, but is there anything else you need to add?
Yes, it's different at the moment. So there's a secondary copy of your data which is safe and sound elsewhere, that we can pull back if our primary version of the data gets corrupted or is infected through ransomware. If you send some ransomware data up to us, we can get it back in section. At the moment, it's different in that we can't spin up the VMs.
Okay.
But with very little effort and very little work, we can start adding that as a. I don't know if we'll make it part of the solution as a standard, or if it's going to be a bolt-on. I don't know.
Okay, so a second pre-event question, which again, I think you've just touched on, is that somebody else has our Cloud DR, but they're asking if they can migrate onto this new Cloud Connect solution.
Oh, right, yeah. So rather than reseed all the data,
rather than starting again from scratch, can they just migrate across?
Yeah, in theory, yeah. In theory, we can move your data straight over to the cloud ERGAP storage, and we can then just repoint the jobs to the new repository, and it would carry on because it would check for the existing chain. It would find the chain in the new repository and it would carry on. Whereas if we didn't do that, you would start again because there wouldn't be an existing chain of data. So yeah, I think we could do that actually. Yeah, it's a good question. It needs testing, but in theory, yeah, that would work.
Okay. And then our final question that's been sent in pre-event. As I say, guys, if you want to send in any questions, please feel free to do so. I'll wait a little while you type. But so one of our primary schools has asked if it's something that they should be looking at instead of our primary cloud backup.
I think we want to offer this to primary schools. It's definitely a secure backup solution. I think there's probably some costing exercises to be done from our perspective to make sure we can do it in a cost-effective way. Because we don't want it to be cost prohibitive, or if the current solution is cheaper than ours, then why would you move?
Yeah.
So we need to cost it. I think there's some costing excess to do. But ultimately, yes, I think we would. It's a good solution for primary schools as well, and I think we would want to do it. We just need to.
The other thing to say is to get in touch with our account managers. So Louise is our account manager for primary schools in the Midlands, and Bruce, who a lot of you will probably know if you're already customers, is our account manager for primary schools in the Northwest and Yorkshire and Humber. And he's done this costing exercise already for a couple of primary schools, and it does appear to be quite dependent on size. And that's predominantly just because obviously if your primary school is slightly bigger, then it's likely to have more data. But generally our primary schools do utilise and need a lot less data than our secondary schools. So we're not saying no by any stretch, and we're not saying it's only going to be available to you in the future. What Bruce is saying is he wants to do that cost-effective journey with you on an individual basis to make sure it's the right thing for you.
Sounds fair to me.
So yeah, I think that's the first time I've ever actually been able to help on something technical. So I mean, I'm earning my keep here.
You'll be on this side of the camera.
I do quite a few webinar Wednesdays. Anybody who's had to suffer through my Windows ones will know. And we've not had any more questions through, so I can give you a couple more minutes to type in, but I don't think anybody is typing, so I'm going to say you have answered everything you need to, sir. So I want to say thank you very, very much to Ian for his time, and thank you guys. Oh, we've got some typing, so I'll hold on. So thank you very much for watching, guys. And I'll be back next week with another webinar Wednesday. And I hope to see you guys there. Thanks very much. Thanks, Ian. Bye. Bye, everyone.